What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. Welcome to my channel. Week 5 was another crazy week in the college football world. And who knows, do we have a new #1 team in the nation? Well, according to me, you're going to find out here in just a little bit. There's a lot of movement here in my top 25 here for week 6, or I should say as we enter week 6 of the college football season. But before we dive into all that, I just want to say thank you guys so much for the support the channel has seen as of late. It means the world to me to see the lengths that this channel has grown to. Really does mean a lot. If you guys haven't done so yet and you want to support this channel, biggest way you can do that, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell so you know when videos get uploaded. But if you're not comfortable doing that, you can't do that for any reason, that's okay. There are more ways to help me support this channel. You guys are doing one of them right now just by watching the video. You guys can do a lot more by liking, commenting, sharing, anything else you guys are willing and are able to do to help interact and support the channel does mean a lot to me. But enough about me. Without further ado, let's dive into my week 6, or I should say my top 25 poll entering week 6 after week 5, whatever you really want to call it. So let's go ahead and dive on in here. As usual, we start from the bottom up. We go from 25 to 1. But before we dive into the actual top 25 poll, we got to put out a list of honorable mentions. Were a couple teams that dropped out of the poll from last week. Those were the Kansas Jayhawks. Of course, their loss to Texas. They did not have their starter Jalen Daniels available in that game. Kansas is still right there for me as a team that can break back into the top 25 poll. And then Fresno State, not because of a poor performance against the Nevada Wolfpack or anything like that. There are just some teams that I'm liking a little bit better than Fresno State right now. If you want to talk about some other teams that are really, really close to breaking into the top 25 poll, Maryland is right there, right? The Maryland Terrapins are undefeated, although to a lot of people, they're really going to get their first true test when they play the Ohio State Buckeyes this week. I think Iowa is right there as well. Wisconsin's another team I considered, so those three coming out of the Big Ten Conference. You do have a couple Pac-12 teams on here. UCLA and Colorado, I think, are right there still, even though Colorado has lost 2 straight. There are some issues that they got to get figured out, but still a team in contention for a spot in the top 25. There is an ACC school on here with the Clemson Tigers. Again, I think they're still close. I still think the talent on that team is really, really good. They can still definitely get to that 9 or 10 win plateau. You have another Big 12 team here in West Virginia. What a job that Neil Brown has done. They replaced TCU as the Big 12 team on here. And then an SEC school in Texas A&M. They got a big one against the Alabama Crimson Tide. They get that one in Kyle Field, so we'll see how that one goes. And then you have a lot of other Group of 5 teams kind of in the middle of the board here as well. JMU, they are undefeated. Air Force, they are undefeated. And Tulane, still in the conversation for being the best Group of 5 team this year. But again, these teams did not make my top 25 poll. Which teams did? Well, let's go ahead and find that out right now as we take a look at number 25, the Louisville Cardinals. Ladies and gentlemen, have broken in to the Tailgate Nate top 25. I've been very impressed from what I've seen with the Louisville Cardinals so far, and they have been on my honorable mention list for a long time, right? This is a Louisville team that I've just wanted to see a little bit more of and really was excited to see how they played against the NC State Wolfpack, and although it wasn't pretty and it wasn't necessarily the cleanest game, they got it done. They were able to come back. Their defense really stood up. Their offense did what they needed to do, and hey, that's Jeff Brom for you, baby. I've been really impressed by the way that Jeff Brom's been able to move this team along. Really impressed by the way that Jack Plummer has played so far. And, really, really big one here as the Louisville gets Notre Dame coming in to their town there. So a chance for Louisville to prove their ACC contention, much like what Duke did against the Notre Dame team last week. The LSU Tigers are up here. They've dropped 12 spots from number 12 down to number 24. And, well, no one decided to play defense in Oxford this past week. It was a 55-49 game. I do not have any quarrels with where this LSU offense is right now, right? Maybe besides the offensive line needed to give Jaden Daniels a little bit more time, and Jaden Daniels maybe needing to get the ball out a little bit sooner. But when I take a look at LSU, I don't think the offense is necessarily the problem. Obviously, what we saw, the defense did have their struggles there going on the road, playing a very tough, high-tempo, fast-paced offense like what the Ole Miss Rebels are, right? So this is an LSU team that I know, Tiger fans, you are very upset with the way that, or you're very upset with the way this team is playing, understandably so, and it's caused you to be very upset with your head coach in Brian Kelly. Don't be fooled, guys. This is a Tiger team. I know a lot of people are upset that why are they still ranked? They have no business being ranked. I mean, look at their 2 losses. They lost to a top 5 Florida State team and an Ole Miss team that has a really, really good offense. The defenses continue to improve, and they're probably a top 15 team. You'll find out what I think about them later. I think LSU deserves to be ranked still. There's a lot of nice talent here on this team, but there are a lot of issues, especially some defensively, that have to get figured out. Very, very interesting game on the road against Missouri coming up this week. You see the Tigers and talking about the Missouri Tigers at number 21. We'll talk about them here in a little bit. But Kentucky, the Bluegrass State, has 2 undefeated teams right now, and Kentucky is one of those 2, and they are slotted in here at number 23. Now, still want to see a little bit of improved play from this offensive line, and I still want to see Devin Leary cut back the interceptions just a bit, but that was a really, really good game that Kentucky was able to play there against the Florida Gators. How about Ray Davis, huh? A 4-touchdown day, almost 300 yards rushing, played really, really well. Ooh, Kentucky's got to go on the road to play Georgia this upcoming week. It'll be a really, really big test for the Georgia Bulldogs as well as the Kentucky Wildcats. That'll be an interesting one to watch there, but Kentucky still got some questions about the offensive line, and Devin Leary has showcased his talent. Still want to see him cut back on the interceptions a little bit, but Kentucky is a team to watch out for in the SEC East. Kansas State is still ranked here for me. They are a team that I still really, really like. Will Howard there at quarterback is a quarterback that I still have a lot of faith in. DJ Giddens at running back has really come along, not necessarily as a replacement for Deuce Vaughn, because you just can't replace the production that Deuce Vaughn was able to bring, but he's been able to fill those shoes really nicely. Kansas State still got a lot of nice pieces on the defensive end. They did have a bye week last week, and it's just, I was very impressed with what Missouri has done so far. I jumped Missouri here over the Kansas State Wildcats. Missouri also has that head-to-head, so that's also what helped me jump Missouri over. Even though Brady Cook and the wide receiver, Luther Burden, I believe is that name, although don't attack me if that is incorrect there. But I'm going to confirm that right now. But yeah, Luther Burden, I was right. Don't know why I doubted myself so much there. But Missouri, that quarterback to wide receiver connection there with Cook to Burden has been electric this year. Brady Cook has still not thrown an interception yet this season, and Missouri is flying high. But, very interesting game coming up here. You got the LSU Tigers rolling into town. Tiger on Tiger crime here in this game. We've already talked about how LSU has a lot of issues they need figured out. Missouri still has played perfect football up to this point, but man, they have looked really, really impressive. I'm excited to see the way that they play this game here against the LSU Tigers. I've lingered on this slide for long enough. Let's go ahead and change over to my top 20. At number 20, I do have the Tennessee Volunteers. This team really started to come along last week here against the South Carolina Gamecocks. The offense was really able to start flowing. Again, not necessarily to what we saw last year, but the Tennessee offense did really get a lot of things honed in on and figured out last week. The defense has really started to take steps in the right direction there as well. So for the Tennessee Volunteers, again, still want to see them play a little bit better. But all in all, when I take a look up and down at this Tennessee team, they do have a bye week coming up here next week, so a nice opportunity for them to rest, to really practice, and then hone in on things because Tennessee's got a very interesting game the very week after there against Texas A&M. So, and then the week after that, you guys know what it is. It's the third Saturday in October. It's Tennessee on the road playing Alabama. So a lot of interesting games for Tennessee coming up. I think it's a really good spot for them to have their bye week where they have it. Chance for them to work on some things there as well. Miami is up here at number 19. Now, the Hurricanes did not play last week. They were on bye. Coming up this week for the Hurricanes, you end up getting a Georgia Tech team. But Miami does have a lot of big games still down the road on the schedule here in 2 weeks. You have to play North Carolina. Clemson comes into town in 3 weeks. Regardless, Miami does move up one spot here. Really have been impressed with the way that Tyler Van Dyke has been able to come along. There are a lot of offensive weapons stepping up, playing some big minutes. Defense is stepping up, playing some big minutes. Miami just looks like a really, really good football team right now. Definitely a team that I would consider putting in the ACC championship game, and they're going to have their chances to prove why they should be there. Again, North Carolina, Clemson coming up here in a couple of weeks back to back. Utah has dropped down 7 spots here to number 18. Now, Utah, I don't question their defense at all. I actually really, really like the way that Utah's defense has been playing, and Kyle Whittingham, for the most part, is just a defensive genius, right? So not concerned about this Utah defense. It was a struggle at times being able to defend what the Oregon State Beavers were able to throw at them, but this Utah offense quite simply needs to get healthy now because quite honestly, guys, the schedule is only going to ramp up for the Utah Utes from here. And I mean, just taking a look at what Utah has here coming up in the coming weeks. If I can go ahead and find the Utah Utes here. Having a little bit. Oh, here we go. So Utah is on bye this week. Then you got California, and then the gauntlet begins, right? You got to go on the road against USC. Oregon comes into town, get a break with Arizona State, and then you got to go on the road to play the Washington Huskies. So, I mean, Utah, Cam Rising coming back now and taking a bye week here to get healthy is going to be the most important thing for Utah right here, right? Get your offense healthy. That starting running back whose name is escaping my mind too. He has been out. Brant Keithy has been out all year. This is the Utah offense that I think their bye week coming at a perfect time. It gives them an extra week to rest up, get healthy, and hopefully get Cam Rising back on the field because especially in that Oregon State game, boy, it showed how much they really need him on the field. Duke, for me, only dropped 1 spot here. Honestly, I was really impressed with the way that Duke was able to hang with Notre Dame. I definitely thought Notre Dame would be able to pull away from that game a whole lot sooner. But yeah, Duke football is legit. It is real. It is an ACC contender. Now, Duke did suffer a scare there, though. Riley Leonard went down with an injury. I myself am not sure to what extent the injury is. Some of you Duke fans, some of you other people that may have seen, let me know in the comment section down below what the extent of the injury is to Riley Leonard. I'd be very, very curious to see where that whole thing sits. But when I look at Duke here, I mean, they just really were able to prove themselves last week. And yes, Riley Leonard did not have his best game passing. However, that is a really good Notre Dame secondary. The Duke defense was able to create pressure on a really, really good offensive line. Granted, Notre Dame just kind of did have an uncharacteristic day there with penalties and everything like that. But Duke, Riley Leonard, this offense, this defense is legit. I'm loving the way that Duke is playing football right now. Even though they did lose last week, Duke's got a lot of games coming up to where they can jump back ahead here in the ACC conversation. Oregon State, we've talked about them already a little bit here. They played the Utah Utes this past week. And they were able to get that one done, get the win. Damian Martinez looked really, really good. Again, my bigger takeaway from that one was just kind of seeing how much Utah really needed the play of Cam Rising and some of the other offensive weapons that they missed in that game. But no discredit to what the Oregon State Beavers are doing right now. They're playing a really, really good brand of football, especially defensively. Offensively, DJU has shown his moments. Damian Martinez has been fantastic. And this is an Oregon State team that a lot of people should be fearing here, especially if you are a fan of some of these teams in the Pac-12. Oregon State has a lot of their tougher games down the road here, right? Finishing out the schedule, you do have to play UCLA in a couple of weeks, and then Washington and Oregon are your last 2 games to finish out the regular season. So it'll be interesting to see how the Beavers handle things later on this season. So let's go ahead and move on into the top 15 here, where we are talking about another Pac-12 team, Washington State. Quick water break. Always remember to stay hydrated. Boy, it feels like forever since I've last said that. But let's talk about the Washington State Cougars here, shall we? The Cougars I've been very, very impressed with so far. Cam Ward just looks like a Heisman contender. They were on bye week last week. Very interesting game when they have to go on the road and play UCLA this week. Right now, UCLA is the favorite in that game. So Washington State strolls into the Rose Bowl unbeaten, and I think we're going to get to learn a lot more about where this Washington State team sits this weekend. But from what I've seen so far, the defense has really stepped up, are playing well, and even though Cam Ward is an entirely new group of wide receivers when you compare them to last year, I mean, he's absolutely balling out. He's a Heisman contender in my mind. Washington State looks really, really good, and just by virtue, some other teams falling below them, they did jump up 2 spots. Compared to my last poll. Ole Miss, though, they jumped up 4 spots here. Look, yes, it was an offensive shootout, and you can't really be impressed with either team's defense when you're talking about LSU or Ole Miss there in that game. But what I was impressed with was the way that this Ole Miss offense was able to work against an LSU defense that honestly has been really pretty good for most of this season. I was very impressed with Jackson Dart, very impressed with this wide receiver group. Quinshon Judkins finally started to turn it on, although, again, in a game where defense was really non-existent. We'll see if Quinshon Judkins is able to continue that, but that has to be a big boost of confidence for this Ole Miss team. They get the absolutely huge, massive win, and we'll see if Ole Miss can continue this here moving forward. As I mean, when you take a look at what Ole Miss has coming up here on their schedule, Arkansas is coming up this week. Interesting game on the road against Auburn, and you still have to go on the road and play Georgia later this year as well. Again, the Alabama game is done, so a lot of winnable games for Ole Miss here on the schedule. Could we be talking about 10 wins again for the Rebels this year? Again, definitely something that I think a little bit remains to be seen. North Carolina for me is here at number 13. Love the way that Drake May is really being able to come along here and play. North Carolina does have Syracuse this week. They are a team that were on bye week last week. Still want to see that defense take some steps in the right direction here, but I think when we go back 2 weeks here talking about that game at Pitt, yeah, Drake May is not lighting up the scoreboard like he was last year. In the game against Pitt, only 296 yards and 1 touchdown, but he's really starting to come along, really starting to gel with some of the new weapons that he has. This is the North Carolina run game that is a lot better than it's been in years past. Get the defense right in North Carolina. I mean, even if the defense doesn't get right, still with Drake May and company, this is an ACC contender, but it's really going to help them if that defense can solidify some things as well. Oklahoma is up here at number 12, and big game coming up this week, the biggest game of the weekend. Another water break. Sorry, my throat's been really bothering me here as of late, probably from all my talking and rambling, but Oklahoma at number 12, the Red River rivalry. I mean, that is just a huge game in not only the Big 12 world and not only the college football world here, but just a big game for both of these two schools heading on into the SEC. The last time they are going to be playing each other as members of the Big 12. By my eye, they have looked like the 2 best teams in the Big 12 all year long. Oklahoma's offense has really come together, right? Dylan Gabriel has exploded. The defense has definitely shown their signs for improvement this year as well. So this is definitely going to be a very interesting test for the Oklahoma Sooners. They've jumped up here to number 12. Alabama has jumped up here to number 11. It really started to come together for Nick Saban's group here in this last week's game against Mississippi State. Jalen Milroe and the offense really were able to piece some things together very nicely here in this past game. And the defense just looks outstanding, as I've kind of been saying all along when talking about the Alabama Crimson Tide. But the offense still does have some work to do, but man, did it make some leaps and bounds of improvement in the game against Mississippi State. That's why Bama has jumped up 2 spots here to number 11. My top 10 teams have not changed. Now, the order, yeah, okay, the order has changed, and it starts with USC being down here at number 10. Now, look, I think this is just me being a little bit higher on Notre Dame than most people, but man, USC, I don't really think there was a whole lot of doubt that they were going to lose the Colorado game entering the game, and then once the game started, you could kind of tell, like, okay, yeah, USC is going to run away with things here. But then it started to not really look so pretty for them. They gave up a lot of late scores, and who knows, man, if Colorado recovers that onside kick, you heard Dion say, you heard Shadur say that they were going to go down the field and score, and you know what? I believe them on that because the way that the USC defense was playing late was not really conducive to what a national championship team should look like, right? And I don't know if it's that they took the foot off of the gas pedal, but I think I mentioned that in my video when I previewed that game, right? They can't do that because Colorado can make you pay. USC was able to force some really nice 3-and-outs. They were able to string together some really good defensive possessions there in that game, but all in all, I mean, when I take a look up and down at this USC team, there are zero concerns for me about the offense, but there's every reason to be concerned about what the USC defense is, considering what the Trojans have coming up here on the schedule. Arizona's coming up this week, but I mean, you have Notre Dame on the road here in a couple of weeks. Utah, a team that USC has struggled with in the past, comes in there, and Cam Rising hopefully will be able to play there in that game. I think that's what you have to prepare for, right? So USC definitely one of the interesting team to watch here. They did drop a spot here to number 10. Notre Dame did rise a spot here to number 9. You played Ohio State very, very close, lost in heartbreaking fashion. And then this past week, it almost seemed like Notre Dame was going to lose in heartbreaking fashion again. But 4th and 16, Sam Hartman was able to convert. Audric Estime is able to run it into the end zone, and Notre Dame is the one coming out on top in late game heroic fashion here in the game against Duke this past week. Now, they did have some very unexpected things go on, right? Especially on the offensive line. Duke was really able to get pressure, and Notre Dame had a lot of uncharacteristic penalties in that game. However, I really like the way that Sam Hartman, and you can't even say grew up, but just the veteran presence that Sam Hartman has to be able to know what his team needs, to be able to deliver, and then Audric Estime, the veteran running back there, was able to deliver his part as well. Just been very impressive with the way that Notre Dame has played football so far this year. Even though there is a loss on that schedule, man, Notre Dame's got a lot of big games coming up, including one this week on the road against Louisville. Another team I have in my top 25, Notre Dame is at number 9. Oregon is here at number 8. And I also really like the way that the Ducks are playing football right now as well. And when you go ahead and take a look at what Oregon did last week, yeah, it was a little bit of a struggle to start off the game against the Stanford Cardinal, but Oregon was really able to find themselves here and duplicated the score result from the previous weekend when they beat Colorado 42-6. Same sort of score here, right? You ended up beating you ended up being Stanford 42-6 as well. Oregon is on bye this week, and then a huge matchup coming up here when you go on the road to play Washington, and then you have Washington State and Utah. Those are all back-to-back weeks. No bye week mixed in there again. As I said, Oregon on bye this week. So very interesting slate of games coming up for the Ducks. Can't wait to watch and see what they do. Penn State did drop a spot here to 7, not because I've thought any less of Penn State. Now, they did bleed a little bit there for maybe the first 20 to 25 minutes in that game against Northwestern, but they were able to find themselves, they were able to come through, and they were able to get the very, very big win. Again here, you take a look towards the later portion of this month, October 21st, Penn State does play Ohio State, which is going to be an absolutely massive game for both of those two teams in Columbus. But again, Penn State, Drew Aller is the real deal. This is a loaded defense, a loaded running back room. The wide receiver room is really, really good. I don't have a whole lot of questions about the Penn State again, but we did see them bleed this past week against a Northwestern team that just is not all that great. No, Penn State really did drop a spot just because that the more and more I watch the Washington Huskies, the more and more I get impressed with what Washington is doing. Now, Michael Penix did not light the world on fire this past week, and the Washington offense as a whole did not light the world on fire this past week. We just saw Washington bleed last week, right? They really struggled to get past Arizona. Now, I don't think the game at any point was really in question, but Jaden DeLora did not play here in this game, and Arizona's backup here, 232 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick, was really able to carve through this Washington secondary at times here, and the Arizona run game was able to work somewhat effectively there as well. So Washington, again, don't have a lot of quarrels about the offense. Michael Penix did have his struggles in this past game, but all in all, we did just see Washington bleed this past week. They've been one of the more impressive teams up to this point in the entire country, But again, what did we just talk about last week? We saw them bleed, right? This goes back to my conversation I had in my takeaway video where there's no elite teams. That'll continue here as we take a look at my top 5. Florida State has stayed at number 5 for me. When you take a look here at what the Seminoles have done so far, of course, you have 2 huge wins on the slate. You have the game against LSU that you were able to win. You were able to really pull away there in the fourth quarter. Then you have the win over Clemson there as well. Did struggle, however, in that game against Boston College. So, the Florida State does have a Virginia Tech team coming into town that they should be able to beat Syracuse the week after. And then you play Duke. So, still a lot of games here now. Don't count out Virginia Tech. Don't count out Syracuse. Those are teams that have the opportunity to give Florida State a little bit of a scare here, but just the way that Florida State has played football this year has to keep them as a top 5 team right now. Still, I do believe their best half of the season has been that second half against the LSU Tigers. We'll see if they can play a better half of football or an equally as good half of football here down the road. Ohio State and Texas flip-flop spots for me. Again, I do not dislike Ohio State any more than I have in previous videos. You can make the case for why really any of these 5 teams and any of the 5 teams on the previous slide could be the number 1 team in the country right now, right? When I take a look at the Ohio State Buckeyes, very interesting game coming up here against Maryland. This is probably Maryland's first big test, but the Terps do roll into Columbus undefeated with Talia Tagovailoa playing really, really well. So, but Ohio State just proved last week that they can grind out a physical game. Notre Dame tried to use the Michigan game plan to beat Ohio State, and Ohio State was able to beat it, right? And Kyle McCord really grew up there in that last minute and 26 and really certified himself as a dude in this Ohio State quarterback room. Best group of pass catchers in the entire country, really good running back room, and the defense is the second best scoring defense in the nation. But when I take a look at Texas really answered the bell this past week, right? Texas has bled at times this year. They bled at times in the game against the Alabama Crimson Tide, and they were right there neck and neck for around 2.5 to 3 quarters with the Wyoming Cowboys, albeit a very good, experienced defensive team, but a team that Texas should have taken care of business a lot easier than they did. But Texas really answered the call last week. And I know Kansas did not have Jalen Daniels there in that game, but Texas really stepped up. Again, the thing that's impressed me with Texas is they're not playing down to their level of competition, which is what has plagued Texas in the past. Just a very impressive performance offensively and defensively from the Texas Longhorns there in the game against Kansas. Really were able to turn it on there in the second half. No question for me that Georgia's still a top 2 team, but they did drop a spot here now. Michigan is my new number 1 team. Georgia has shown a lot of vulnerability so far this season, and it's taken them quite some time to get past teams like UAB and South Carolina, and most recently the game against Auburn. You even go back to the game against UT Martin that, while neither of these games, maybe besides the Auburn game, were really in question of Georgia losing, they definitely have bled a lot more than some other teams have bled so far this season. So that, for me, is why Georgia did drop a spot, especially with their struggles against an Auburn team that really is not all that great offensively. Michigan has definitely had some quarrels this year, right? The play of the offensive line, the play of Donovan Edwards, and the play of J.J. McCarthy at times, although he still is one of the leaders, if not, I believe, the leader in completion percentage across the entire nation. But when I take a look at this Michigan team and I take a look at what they did against Nebraska this past week, I see the number 1 team in the country right there. Michigan played like it. They strung together a complete performance, and I really don't have a lot to complain about from their last week's game. Offensively, defensively, it all came together, and with as much as Georgia's bled, that for me leads Michigan to be the number 1 team in the nation right now. It's a team that I've said is going to win the national title. That defense has not given up double-digit points yet this year, and who knows, maybe Michigan doesn't really get tested until they go play Penn State and Ohio State in November. But when I look at the Michigan team right now, I see a team that's ranked number 1 in the nation for me. That's going to do it for my top 25 here. Please let me know your guys' top 25 in the comment section below. I truly do not believe there is an elite team in college football this year, and I know I talked a lot longer in this video than I do in most top 25s, but there was a lot I wanted to talk about. So thank you guys for all your support. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. See you guys in the next video. Goodbye.